Hey, welcome to Wing Talk. This is our special Olympics wrap up. We're going to talk about the Winter Olympics and all the good stuff that happened. Actually, no, this is Tools, Tips, and Tricks month, and we've got a lot to cover today. Today, we also have two members from the INAV Fixed Wing Group, longtime members, interviews with them. Really interesting people to speak with. So before we get into talking about all that good stuff, we should start off by introducing the people that make this special. Our pilot in charge, Marc Hoffmann. How are you doing today?
Yeah, hi Steve. I'm doing well and looking forward to a great show as always.
Awesome. Hey, Marc, I spent about 10 minutes. I didn't really realize that the Olympics were still on last night. So the four-man luge team, first place, gold medal, Germany. Second place, gold medal, Germany. Third place, actually, second place is silver medal. And third place, bronze medal, was Canada. But there's something about, four guys getting into a luge, running as fast as they possibly can, jumping on and hanging on for dear life that I think that you can relate to. I don't know. Was that a...
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy that you're so enthusiastic into all these Olympic sports because I have not seen any single thing of it because I'm not really interested in that. So, but yeah, it's good and nice to hear that Germany has a few medals now.
Yeah, it's not really, the United States didn't do super well, but anyway, hey, Darren, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I didn't even know the Olympics was on if it hadn't been for your like the guy curling post.
Oh, we have a little bit of a problem though in the UK. It looks like the Queen has picked up COVID.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't hear that. All I heard that she's got 12 million out of the bank for someone.
Oh, one of her kids. Awesome. Hey, Luke, let's pick up on that. Good day, Luke. Luke's quiet right now.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, Darren bringing all the gossip on the Queen. Yeah, it's all good here. Been a stormy weekend, but other than that, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly. You know what? God, if we have time to kill today, there is somebody in the UK who went to Heathrow Airport and decided to live broadcast all the planes landing at Heathrow in the wind. Did you see that?
I saw a plane landed at Heathrow in the wind.
Yeah, I saw a few. One particular, I think it was an A380 Qantas that came in very, very sideways. Managed to swing it back around and stay on the centre line, but yeah.
Speaking of the wind and flying, it seems like your big plan was to see if you can get your planes flying a little bit faster in the 100-mile-per-hour head start.
Yeah, I certainly wasn't trying to break any records or anything, but I thought it'd be a bit of fun. Unfortunately, I didn't really have any INAV planes flying at the moment. Well, certainly not any particularly fast ones. The fast thing I had was my mini AR wing. And I took off at full throttle. I stayed at full throttle the entire flight. That was about 10 seconds long. And landed about 10 meters behind me, so that wasn't going to go anywhere. I did then fly another line of sight plane, which normally does about 115, 120 miles an hour, and it hit 172. So yeah, there are definitely some strong winds.
Have you seen it lately?
It was actually quite surprising. It's a fast plane that handled the wind very well. Apart from the difference in speed, going upwind to downwind, it really didn't mind about it too much.
Jeez, 170 miles an hour, it handles the 100-mile-per-hour wind. It handles it fine. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, it must have been about 55, 60 mile an hour winds, but yeah, it was it didn't mind it too much. I think
my planes have problems with 5-mile-per-hour winds, so.
I think it's partly held because I fly right at the seafront, so it's nice, calm wind coming over the sea. So no turbulence from trees or anything like that. But yeah,
perfect. Hey, all right. So our first guest today, Samantha Collins, is first of all, Samantha. Can you wave hello to everybody? So
hello.
You got. Do we see her? There you go.
Are you hearing me?
I hear you. There you are. Fantastic. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. She got some sleep. All right. So Samantha has been a long-time member of the INAV Fixed Wing group. And so we are going to talk. We had a little bit of fun. We're going to get a little bit heavy right now. We're going to talk about health and women in particular, because one of the most something that people don't really understand a lot, when you have women who get, let's say, breast cancer, and it's a slow degenerative disease and people see it, and so it's something that a lot of people respond to, but unfortunately something that kills exactly 10 times more women than breast cancer is been cardiovascular issues, so heart attacks and strokes in particular. So Samantha was just a cool person, just cruising along in life, and all of a sudden she had 3 strokes, and so we're going to, because of that, it's affected her speech pattern. So interviewing her today is something different. I have to actually, what I asked her to do is write me up something so I can read what she said, and like maybe we can hit on certain points. So I am going to read what she said. Let me pull it up here. Let me get the glasses on. Let's see. All right, here we go. Let's see, make it a little bit bigger. Okay. Samantha came from Miami, FLA, hitchhiked a ride across the USA, went to the Apollo. You should have seen her go, go, go. She said, "Hey, babe, take a walk on the wild side." Samantha's dancing back there. It's awesome. Okay. It says, first of all, I apologize for me reading to everybody, but this is the best I can do. It says, regarding Samantha Collins, I'm a 52-year-old parent of 4 lovely children, 2 girls and 2 boys, ranging from 20 years to 13 years, and they all live at home along with my wife, Stacy. I had a series of strokes in 2019, 2020 that caused my balance to go a bit wibbly wobbly, and has left me with apraxia, whereby I find mechanics of forming words can be very difficult, sometimes impossible. Yes, I will not only change a sentence because I can't say a certain word, I will change the entire conversation. Thankfully, I still think at full speed and can type quite fast. So yeah, so she can think and type very quickly. That's an important thing. I left school back in 1986 with a view to going into the Navy as an electronics weapon engineer. Okay, she's in the UK, so this is the UK Navy. Unfortunately, then undiagnosed issue with vision in my right eye meant that I could not be enlisted. So I did my apprenticeship landside and qualified as a TV repair bod, complete with little van and some long screwdrivers. So Samantha went around and fixed TV sets. If sailing the world and having a potential to send ballistic missiles soaring overhead was not to the idea of spending the entirety of my days fishing out dead mice from the back of people's CRTs was crippling. So I often went to study law. The happy little incident saw me practicing as a criminal law advocate for 17 years before the legal aid and the poverty it created paid its toll. Hey, Darren, something I wanted to ask you about, or Luke. So she is an advocate. So what is that? Is that a lawyer?
To be honest, I read this before we went live, and I didn't know what that meant. So I don't know if Darren does. We may have to get Samantha to explain it.
It's different in the UK than it is here. I think it's we call it paralegal here, but our paralegals are different from the UK paralegals. They make coffee in the UK. Wait, he's
hold it the
something.
other way up, Samantha.
It's upside down. Okay. She said she stood in the court and spoke. Okay, perfect. Got it. All right, so that's right. When you got in trouble in the UK, like Luke, if you got in trouble, you get in trouble with your planes, give Samantha a call. She'll get you out of the plane.
That's a big fat no.
Yeah, she knows all the aircraft law. Let's see. So she was a criminal lawyer, and she was going broke doing that. I woke one morning and decided I need to actually help people, not use my petty criminal. I tried so hard to defend. So time to change again. I joined the National Health Service and trained to be an ambulance medic. So NHS, National Health Service in the UK. It took me up until 2019 when I blown away by my brain deciding to have an identity crisis and thinking I was entirely right to party without inviting me. I was hospitalized on October 19th and had a series of 3 strokes in total between then and June of 2020. Fingers crossed, they say that things come in threes, but hey, I could have been much worse. Having been an ambulance medic, I have seen firsthand how devastating having a stroke can be. She feels like she's dodged the bullet, and though she doesn't have the ability to speak freely, many would say it was actually a benefit for her not to be able to speak freely, because I'm sure she was, you get to know Sam, she's very vivacious, and it's certainly a lot quieter now, and I can honk what I like, and people without fear are accidentally blurting it out.
It does. I love that part. Absolutely love that part.
It does also mean I can think of a joke and start laughing out loud, and nobody knows why this stupid lady is settling into fits of giggles. On the plus side, no one has ever sits next to me on the bus. Yes, I am the crazy one your mom's warned you about. Okay, so this is going back to childhood. She said, remember as a child, no more than 7 or 8 years old, my grandfather built a radio-controlled line plane with parts salvaged from an old broken television set. Now, that's a kind of interesting story. How do you make a RC plane out of a broken TV? Nothing fancy, but it flew, and the point of the thought of flight got to me. The majesty of soaring through the sky like a bird on a wing that led to a lifelong passion with aviation. In my teens, I remember building my first 40-size high-wing trainer from balsa and covered. I flew that for 7 years. It was a bit like Trigger's broom. It went through about 5 engines, 3 fuselages, and had a good set of wings. But to me, it was the same plane. All right, so she basically kept rebuilding the plane.
Jump in, Steve. Just to explain Trigger's broom, because it's very much a British thing.
Yeah, for a non-English person, Trigger's broom doesn't really mean much.
No. So there's a TV program called Only Fools and Horses, which is just, it was in the 70s, 80s, I guess. It went on probably to about the 90s. But there's this guy in it who's a little bit slow. And he was basically a cleaner, and he would be talking about his broom, how he had it and was using it for 20 years. And it was still original. Everything was perfect on it. And it was questioned about how do you get it to last so long? And he's like, well, it's had 5 heads and 7 handles.
Thanks for explaining that. It was sometime near the end of 1998, I think, when I encountered FPV, not live as we have it, but a very low quality onboard video recording. I was blown away. Literally, what the world looked like from above just blew my mind. I was like a massive drug hit. I just had to have it. Well, a couple of years and a few thousand pounds later, which is money, I obtained my PPL, private pilot's license, but not for GA as such. It was for micro lights. So, Darren, what is a micro light?
Is that
like a trike?
Imagine a hang glider with a
it's a
seat
trike
and a motor on the back.
So, yeah. So they have those in Hawaii. You can go to Hawaii and you can pay some guy in flip-flops to take you up like 3,000 feet on one of those things.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrifying. But yeah, I had friends who do that. But you don't need a GA license for that. Who wants heaters and cup holders when flying? Yes, I flew an open cockpit like trike-style microlight. So it's a trike from Kent to the south of France. So that means she went over the English Channel then, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yes, I flew an open cockpit, let's see, some of which was a good 2,000 meters high. Oh my God. 2,000 meters high? Yeah, it's.
I think that wasn't just 2,000 meters high. That's 2,000 above what what it was capable of going. Theoretic, or according to the handbook or whatever. So that's probably more like 5,000 meters or something.
Wow, that's insane. Jeez, I wouldn't want to do that. Higher than the wing and the engine rating for the craft. Okay, so she took it over 2,000 meters above what it was rated for. Just for shits and giggles. And the weather, of course, and the wine and the cheese. Actually, thinking about it, I really don't know why I came back. Please don't tell my wife I said that. Then she talked about she found INAV from the days of Clean Flight, right after we forked from Clean Flight. Then she built her first quad, and she had it flying quite successfully. Oh, she took on a Hobby King Tech Sumo. That's what I was actually flying today. And she said that a tree came out and grabbed it, and then she had the S800, a Nano Talon, a couple of flight tests, self-built foamies, all varying degrees of success and failure. And then I had a flying wing with autopilot. Okay, well, thanks for joining us today, Samantha. I actually, she's taken off. I actually still think it's flying. It went up, flew straight, and just kept on flying. I keep looking on Google Earth to see if I can see it somewhere. I often think it has caused some UFO sightings, and I guess no one really knows. I stumbled upon Matt Osborne's channel, Rag the Nuts Off, on YouTube, and I think it was what sparked my interest again in using INAV, as finally it looks like it's being a lot more stable. It would have been around INAV 2.3 era, but I could be wrong. I know that to the frenzy of buying planes, never really a wing type of person, and to be honest, I had a Ranger G2, Max Thrust Riot, Phoenix V2, and my beloved Hobby King Walrus. That's a nice little plane. More flight tests, foam builds than I can remember. I flew INAV in one form or another, and all lived in either to be sold or passed to friends into the hobby. And I kept my Nano Talon. I purchased a Drift. Okay, so what happened was when she got the stroke, she decided to give away all her planes. She actually had her license revoked. She had her general aviation license revoked, her auto license revoked, and she got bummed out and gave away all of her INAV planes. So she kept a Nano Talon and purchased a Drift. They both would break down and go into boxes. And she loves the whole idea of putting planes into boxes because it's very convenient. I purchased an e-bike that meant I had a little more freedom. I could continue to park fly. But my passion is long-range cross-country flying, the kind I used to do on those summer afternoons in my microlight. Yes, both the Nano Talon and the Drift could do long flights without proper transport accessing sufficient open space. To fly long range was difficult. I've all but gave up my dream of flying the way I wanted to and reverted back to quads, not racing, just cruising. Then DJI went and released their FPV system. I resisted as long as I could, convincing myself that analog was better for long range, and then hard out of 13 kilometers was severe limiting factor. But who was I kidding? The image on those goggles blew me away, and I was like having an IMAX cinema strapped to your head, both figuratively and literally. Let's face it, the design of those goggles it's only a mother could love. Okay, and let's see. I'm coming down a little bit further here. The Drift had an F411 WSE, flew amazingly well, but my Dart 250G flew on its own for about an hour and a half with 300 milliamp ion pack when it lost connection, launched, and circled overhead. So I remember that story. She launched the plane, lost connection with it, and it was this little the Drift had it was Drift. So the thing was flying around with the flight controller for a good hour and a half until the battery died. So she had to sit there and watch it the whole time. I would have just kind of went home and came back later, but anyway. And then she worked with Marc and got auto launch work really well with using the 250G Dart. And what she was asking at the time, and this is something, one of the reasons that we're going to have Marc go over this, is that she kept asking about Copilot, because what she found was Copilot actually worked, and it was, at the time, INAV was just too hard to set up. But then I fell in love with INAV 3.0. It was good. 3.1 was better. 4 is near perfect. INAV has finally gotten to where I was hoping it would have been. The follow the fork from Clean Flight, now it seems like an eternity ago. So the idea was that she found that she was asking for an INAV Lite, simplified setup process for getting your plane flying, and she feels that INAV 4.0 in particular has done that. She also has a ASW 28. Well, the other thing that's important is that she got her driver's license back, so now she's going to get bigger planes. Now she's taking INAV 4.0 out, and she's going to fly on the ASW 28 and also the Phoenix 2000. So those are her two. The idea is she's trying to do long-range flying. Let's see.
And for the perfect timing, just Henrik went into the stream and chat, and he can come up with his gliders are boring topic.
Is Henrik here?
He's just arrived in the chat, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Hey, Henrik. All right, and then I asked her, one of the questions I asked her was, I'm just going to paraphrase this because it's good stuff. I asked her, why don't we have more women in the group? I mean, the idea is that women should be as interested in flight than men are because it's universally beloved. This was something that people lived for a very long, thousands of years ago. They dreamed of being able to fly like a bird, and now we can do it. And why isn't half the planet is into it as the other half of the planet is into it? So I'll just read one paragraph of what she wrote here. From a young age, girls are conditioned to be the carer, the provider, the mother, the cook, the cleaner. They walk down the aisle, and of any toy shop, the stereotype is repeated again and again. Girls' toys are family dolls, kitchen, cleaning equipment. Go 2 rows, and the boys are into guns, the Action Man, G.I. Joe, RC cars, planes, and other things. They get all the fun stuff. Girls grow up at home being taught how to cook, sew, use washing machines, all worth the trades. They're all worth the trades, but as you need a mother and a wife. While boys are taught to mend their bikes, build tree houses, work on cars, build toys from themselves. That's traits that will go on to make them a provider, the worker, the breadwinner. If you look at any bookshop, toy shop, nursery school, schools, and colleges, you'll see that some tropes repeated again and again. That these tropes are repeated again and again. It's as though we have not moved 1 inch from hunter-gatherers that we were a millennium ago. So. Yeah, basically, let me see.
But Steve, don't forget that we already have more women in the group. We have, for example, Carolyn Tyler. She also is in the chat right now as a very active member. And I know from some German FPV communities also on Facebook, there are also some women in the groups. Very active, and even in racing, competitive FPV racing, we have also more women these days compared to a few years ago.
Yeah, but my daughter, she won a scholarship for a STEM scholarship. Our local energy company gave her a very generous scholarship, paid for most of her college, but she had to take a STEM career, so she was a math major, and she was like there was like 85 to 90% men in her class, even to this day. Well, that was like 5 years ago. And, it's, I don't know, things are changing, but not fast enough. We always welcome women in the group. It's always great to have them. And, you know, I don't know. Samantha's tried this as well, where taking your kid out and trying to get them interested in flying or building quads or whatever else, and they're just not into it, or just not quite the way they are. And I think, you know, as parents, we've done this as well. I've actually had some of my daughter's friends come over who are girls, and I'll take them out flying because they have an interest in it. But I don't know. We really, you know, I wish I knew how we can get more women interested in it, other than we just kind of expose them to it, and that's the best thing. And I mean, that's what I can say.
Caroline.
All right, so
Steve.
That's Samantha. Samantha, is there anything? Did I cover everything you feel like?
Yeah. The last part.
The last part.
Just we need more exposure.
Oh, let me read this last paragraph from you.
Yeah.
Okay, the ever-increasing exposure to STEM in school classrooms is bringing new blood into the hobby. Fixed wing is helping that in regards as it is trendy. It's not an old man standing in the field watching his old, noisy, dirty greaser doing circuits. There are a number of prominent females in the RC hobby on YouTube. Zoe FEV, Claire RC, Marone High, etc., who were all, having read their backstories, exposed to electronics and RCs at a young age, and continue with the cradle of intrigue led under that exposure throughout their lives and led them from being prominent figures in the RC community, further worth, and not just because they are female. So what you're saying is that they were exposed to RC or exposed to electronics, and that because of this, they were able to become, you know, prominent figures in the RC community, not because they're women, but because they're really good at what they do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And we, you know, salute to them, and we're always excited to have more women in the group. The most important thing, the other thing I wanted to, you know, I hope I did justice reading this. It's really funny, and I really feel like what we should do is we should probably put this up in the group just as something for people to read.
Yeah.
Get the whole thing, because it's really good. I mean, I only got about half of it, but she's really charming. She's really into this, and, you know, we kind of, you know, this is how the people are. Longtime members, you see these people in the group, and that's kind of want to give more exposure to people who've been around for a while, get to know them. Also, there's a number of people who have joined the group who are general aviation pilots who've had strokes, and they're looking to get back into it. So this is their way in. So, you know, when you're talking about inclusion, we're talking about inclusion in so many different forms. It's your sexuality, it could be your race or whatever else. But also inclusion should mean if you have some kind of disability or something, a life-changing event such as a stroke, you need to feel like you're welcome, and that realistically, you get to know her, nothing's changed about her other than her speech pattern, but she's still as sharp and vivid as she ever is. A really fun person to have in the group. And Sam, we really, really enjoy having you. So thank you for making it back. I'm glad you picked up the planes once again, and we're here to help out. Mark will give you all the assistance you need in PIDs.
Absolutely.
Ranger 2000.
I just thank you to everyone in the fixed wing group for all the support and supporting me through my journey back in. So thank you.
Fantastic, great. We're 100% behind you. And now we're going to switch over to somebody who is another longtime member. And when unfortunately, he speaks well. Just get him to stop talking is the issue. Marco, how you doing today? Marco?
He's on mute.
We can't hear you, Marco.
Marco, you're muted. Yep.
No, we still can't hear you.
You have to unmute your microphone.
There's unmute on Skype. 2. Okay. We're having a little technical. Let's see. Is he saying something? All right. So, hey, Darren.
Yes.
I understand you know that you know Sam. Have you flown with her? You live pretty close by, right?
I think it's about 2.5, 3 hours, something like that.
Yeah, we're trying to tell Marco he's on mute.
There we go. Back. Marco's back.
Are you back? Marco, say something. You can't. Oh, okay. Well, I tell you what, we're probably going to do is take a quick break and we'll get Marco back on and just hang in there for a couple seconds and we'll be right back with everybody.
Now we are live. Okay,
we're back live again. Hey, Marco, welcome back to the show. Welcome to the show. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, so you're about to say, how long have you been in the hobby for?
I have been in the hobby probably for 30 years.
Wow.
So I remember, the good old days with tethered planes and tethered cars.
Okay, so you had the cars. This is like back in the 80s, right?
Early 70s, to be pretty honest.
Wow.
So anyway, I had been in the hobby for long enough. For a while, I was off, only dedicated to cars. When I was in New York, we used to drive.
Uh-oh, we lost his audio again. All right. Oh. So, Marco, we're probably going to have you do us a favor, because I think he's using a phone. What we're going to have you do is have you reboot the phone, and I'm going to talk to Darren for a couple seconds here. And then reboot the phone, and then you come back and join us in the call. So,
yeah,
Darren,
just use the same link.
Yeah, use the same link. Darren, I one thing Samantha did say was that she followed this band around that you happened to be part of back in the day.
Really?
Yeah. Sam, have you seen him in concert?
No. Darren's dad.
Darren's band, right?
Darren's dad plays guitar.
Yeah. He was playing bass in the band. It was like Spinal Tap, but not as popular. It went to 11, right? Jeez. Okay, so we're just going to ask Marco. Marco, take your phone and reboot it. Shut it down. You can power cycle it. Turn it off and turn it back on again. So I think he's writing us some kind of message here.
Oh.
There we are. Are you back? No, he's not back.
Oh, no,
okay.
Sam. It's my father-in-law.
Oh, hey. So fantastic. We'll wait for. Hopefully, he'll reboot his phone, and then that might work. Okay, so we have? What's been going on? In the meantime, Mark, what's been going on with INAV? Have you been working on some secret projects again?
Everyone's muted today.
Yeah, sorry, I have to press the button. So yeah, no secret projects at the moment. I've still not finished my Rafax, the rebuild, but I was the last days very busy with my quadcopters, so I reset up all my quads to make them flight ready, because right now when it's so windy, maybe it makes more sense to fly with the quads instead of the wings, because they don't care about wind that much. But yeah, no secret. I have maybe one little secret, but I think I will keep that for me until a group post, because that's something interesting for Henrik. Darren already knows it.
It's a glider.
Yeah, no, it's not a glider. But just wait 1 second. I will take it. I think Henrik is still in the stream, so I can show it in the stream, and he can tell us what he thinks about it in the chat. Just 1 second.
He'll love it.
We should get Henrik on so he can yell at Mark. That'd be funny. Sam. That's my father-in-law. He's got a YouTube channel. Does guitar instrumentals, and he's like way better than YouTube and pretty much everything else. No.
That's what I was. Yeah.
He's got something like 300,000 odd subscribers, millions and millions of views.
Oh yeah, he rocks it.
So yeah, I'm back right now, and yeah, this is my ZOHD. Fun Alpha Strike Jet. Henrik will love it.
Please tell me you have MG90 servos on there.
No, it's ZOHD servos.
Oh my god. So they're plastic, right?
I think. Yeah, it should be plastic here, I think. Yeah, these are plastic here.
Okay.
So yeah. Yeah, because I literally just took the airframe and took all out of the Alpha Strike. So this one, too many packages here. This one is completely naked now, and put everything on the Funjet Ultra to make it fly.
Hey, Marco is back. Marco, can you say something now?
Can you hear me correctly?
Yeah, there you are. All right.
Excellent.
We hear you.
Apologies for that.
No
I
problem.
was trying to swap Wi-Fi so I can have a better connection.
Yeah, you're actually moving around better now. You were freezing before. Good.
Yeah.
All right. So you're talking about you've been in the hobby since the 1970s. You play with RC cars.
I had been playing in RC cars. When I was in New York, we were drag racing RC cars. And I was part of the flying club right there.
In New York. So you're originally from Colombia, right?
Yep, I am a Colombian.
Okay. And you've been here since what, the 1970s?
Early step.
77? Yeah, okay. That's cool. And all right, so what was your first RC plane?
My first RC plane was a Red Cat. It was an EDF. I believe that it was the Panther or something like that. I spent probably 3.5 years using the Great Plains RC flight simulator before I started to fly, and that was the best way for me to get into the hobby without to have to buy a plane every other day.
Okay, so the Great Plains probably came out I would say, the mid-1990s.
Yes, I think I still have it.
Yeah. They have these the like this, right? Actually, I think the one you had was more like this. Going way back, something like this.
I think I have the second one, the first one that you showed.
Oh, the first one? Okay, that's newer.
Yeah, I actually upgraded.
This was, yeah, so the idea was you learn how to fly on a flight simulator then, right?
Yep, and you use the reset button and instead of going to buy new planes.
Okay. Yeah, and that's the way I learned too. It was because did you have a Zaggy at one point?
Can you repeat that question, please?
Did you have a Zaggy RC plane? This was a plane.
I only have the FT Spear flight test.
All right. So what happened was back in the 1990s, Zaggy came out. It was really the first RC plane that was made out of foam. And it was made out of styrofoam. At the very front, maybe 10 millimeters was EPP foam on the leading edge. That was kind of like the first forerunner. I got one of those, couldn't make it fly. I did the same thing as you. I got the real flight simulator from Great Plains and learned how to fly on that, right? You got all the model packs as well.
I am going to go back. I actually did have a Zaggy, and I have exactly the same problem that you have. It was impossible for me to fly.
Yeah. It was. Did you take it out and you throw it, and it would like land 5 feet in front of you?
Yeah. Well, it was either or. It will go all the way up and all the way down. It was long before I had the knowledge of how many degrees the control surfaces are supposed to be moving.
Right.
So it was a great glider. I was capable to throw it as high as I could, full power. And whenever I will get out there, I will shut down the motor and gliding was perfect. But once I put power, the thing was impossible to control.
Yeah. Those were run off of like the old brushed motors, and they had they're like huge. They weighed probably like the equivalent of like a 5200 milliamp battery pack, and 3S battery pack. But the thing had 1 amp of power, so they were all NiCad batteries. They're not really the greatest plane.
I was using the battery packs for the cars, and those ones were 4.5 amps.
Yeah. All right. So, what was your first experience with INAV? I mean, what made you want to get into INAV?
Okay, INAV for me was probably about 3 years ago. I am pretty aware that most of us know Charles Blackburn. He's pretty active in INAV. And he was the first person that helped me to take that wing that is right there, the Z84. I purchased the cheapest possible flight controller. It was an F4 from eBay. And I was looking for someone that will start me and start to show me the procedure to connect and how to make things work, because it was so impossible to find a diagram for the connection. And Charles helped me to do the setup for the receiver and for the controller. It was my first wing. I have an incredibly good and successful time with him. And probably 6 months after that, the plane took a dunk in the Atlantic Ocean, because I fly here on the beach all the time.
Yeah.
And that was when I was introduced to the Matec products.
Okay.
And I am pretty happy with the Matec products. So far, I don't use any other brand.
Okay. So you had so you started taking the Matec. What was your flight controller choice? Was it the F405 wing?
Well, yeah, the first one was an F4, and it was one of those little red squares, tiny square red, and they use the special plugs. They have special plugs that have a locking device that you put it in.
I no longer have that. The F405 standard, like this.
Yes.
A little
yes,
plug.
Sir.
Yeah, it has a little plug in the bottom of it right here that has it's like a ribbon cable.
Yep, and it has a clip. It have a latching clip. You need to pull the lever because it have a latching click whenever it gets in.
Right. So yeah, it's called the F-check cable from the Matec. All right, so I know what you have.
Yeah, it was a very unfriendly product. compared to the Matec products, they are incredibly easy to connect.
Oh yeah. Okay. Perfect. Fantastic. All right. So, what have been the issues you've been having with getting INAV working? Because you've kind of come from, you've been flying line of sight for a while.
Yeah, well, I have been a flyer from line of sight for many years, and when I moved into the flight controller area, I started to deal with a lot of issues with noise. Most people is aware that from the perspective of electric noise, you can have products that are working perfectly, and in the precise moment when you put power from the battery, now the controller and the CPU generates so much noise that make it impossible for you, for example, to grab a signal like GPS.
So, Mark, have you heard about this before? We have so much noise that coming off of the flight controller that it affects the GPS.
I've not heard something about the GPS yet, at the moment, or currently, but I know from a friend of mine, they do tracking of animal, like, how's that called? Like small beacon transmitters that are connected to animals to track them down in the wilds for investigations, how they move, like how birds are flying during the seasons and all that stuff. And they are currently working on a project where they put the receiving system on a flying wing. And he told me that indeed he had to completely shell the flight controller and electronics compartment in aluminum foil to completely shield it and keep the noise inside. And yes, he said that even on the flight controller, he got enough noise to disturb the receiving system. So, but it was in the 150 megahertz area.
Hey Marco, also. You got to say something so we can see what you're showing us.
Marco is muted right now.
Are you muted again?
Yeah, I've muted him because he has a strong echo at the moment right now.
Okay.
Marco, you have to unmute yourself and say something so you can show it in the camera.
We're not seeing you. What happens when you speak, we can see you. So. No. No, he's having a problem. Is it possible you can unmute him, Mark?
Unfortunately not. We can only remote mute him, but not unmute.
Oh, okay. He's having a problem finding the mute. So, Darren, do you know about this as far as noise coming off of a flight controller? You mentioned the H743 the other day in particular.
I guess some components are going to be noisy. I know there are some noises because Josh has. I remember Josh has changed some of his flight controllers over from wings to WSEs because for 433 he's started using Dragon League. It's less noisy on those flight controllers than it is on the older Wingstar ones. So
yeah, what he's doing is he's wrapping his flight controllers in aluminum foil to prevent noise. If he's putting a GPS close to the flight controller, and I've noticed that myself.
I've issues with GPSs though. That's yeah. I mean, my Dart 250G, the GPS is right next to the flight controller. I've got my S800. I actually made a bracket to sit it on top of the flight controller. So I've not really had issues with GPS.
The only thing I know that really kills your GPS are some of the split cams, like the Runcam or the Caddx Tarsia, for example. The Tarsia is really bad. So Samantha, I want to say something.
I think it's more the cable having that shielded than the GPS.
Okay, so you're saying you should shield the cable.
Shield the cable.
And Luke, you got to unmute yourself if you want to say something.
Sorry, it was nothing relevant. Yeah.
Yeah, you're saying that. What do you have to say about this as far as shielding cables for GPS? Or is that a good idea?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, shielding cables is definitely a good idea. You know, generally, if you have a grounded shield around a cable, you'll always get less EMI emissions.
So you're talking about wrapping the ground cable around the whatever the transmit and receive, and then the power.
Well, that would work, but more buying or making a shielded cable. So either using copper tape or for example, Ethernet cables are shielded or often are shielded, so you can use Ethernet cables and then soldering the shield to ground. That will significantly help the EM emissions of the cable. So I think Samantha was talking about the cable on split cams from the camera sensor to the recording unit. So that would have to be copper tape or something. I doubt you could ever get they're flat flex cables, so I doubt you could ever get a pre-made shielded cable.
All right, so Samantha, you gotta mute yourself and say something. She's showing something right now.
I made a screen preset for Samantha, so I can switch to her camera manually. Okay. All good.
That's a shielded cable, right?
Yeah. BN 220. Bang good. Shielded cable works really good.
Okay, and what do you use that for?
For GPS.
GPS? Okay, fantastic.
Yeah. So that's actually the cable that goes from the GPS to the flight controller?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I've never shielded the GPS cable. I've done VTX and receiver cables, and the camera cable, but never actually the GPS cable before.
And that probably does make a good point right there, because there seems to be times like some GPSs and some planes just take forever to load up. You have to wait a couple minutes for it, and some take 30 seconds. So that's a good tip right there. There's a tip. First tip of the day.
Yeah, this one this is the
Darren, you're holding something.
Yeah, this is the typical split camera problem. So I've got my camera up here, which is the Runcam Split version 2. My GPS is right away down here. I've got foil in between to try and block it, but it still is absolutely useless for picking up. So I'm going to try and shield this a little bit more. I didn't want to do too much because of heating and that. And I've got one of those Wi-Fi things that I think Sam mentioned in a document. So I can power the GPS without anything else powered up, just to try and get a better fix. But yeah, this is the typical split cam. Even with, it's got to be about 200 mil, 150, 200 mil between them. It still causes issues for the GPS.
And Luke, you said you can use the Ethernet cables, like Cat5 cables, because those are shielded.
Yeah, so I've used those Cat6 cables. Obviously, this is only for bigger planes, but in yeah, there you go. You can't really see it, but a big twin motor FPV plane that I built. I use Cat5 cable going out to the wingtips, because I have on one wingtip I have the receiver and the other wingtip the VTX. So it's just a nice pre-made, very well shielded cable to use with 8 conductors. So.
I mean, that's really interesting how different the experiences are with these things. I mean, of course, shielding cables is always good. There was just recently a post in the group where someone had the issue that in flight he randomly lost his GPS with a short error, and then it came back and had to re-search for satellites. Because I think if INAV loses the connection between the GPS and the flight controller completely for a moment, it resets the GPS or reboots it automatically, and has to search the satellites again as a hot start. I had never big issues with GPS yet. I was lucky with my split cams, because I have the ones that don't cause any problems. I'm still not sure if for the KDX Tarsier if the issue comes from the board itself or from the camera cable. But I also see here in the chat right now, Caroline Tyler writes, I twist all my longer wire runs. GPS I've noticed is most affected by 5.8 gigahertz transmissions. And that's what I mean, how different the experiences are, because I have one of my quads that has actually GPS, even with better flight, just to see the distance from home, my speed, and have rescue mode. And the GPS antenna is literally sitting on top of the GPS like 5 centimeters away, and I have no problem with that. The fix takes a little bit longer with the BN220, it takes a while anyway. But yeah, the reception is totally fine as soon as there's a lock. So
hey, we got Marco back. Marco, you want to add to this whole thing about shielding?
Well, basically, I was showing you my plane on the way that I use aluminum foil, and I create a 2-layer capacitive system that literally shield the entire flight control. That is what I was showing you when I went mute.
Yeah, you can show it now again. It's just important that you say something so the camera can switch to you. If you want, you can show it in the camera now.
Okay.
This is it.
This is an AR Pro, and I have right here. You can see right there the capacity layer. It is 2 layers of copper. One is aluminum, the other one is copper, and they are separated. And basically, they cancel the signal, you know, the high noise frequency that is coming out of the controller, because the GPS is directly right there next to it, you know.
What flight controller do you use on that AR wing?
I have the H743 wing.
Okay, interesting. Because I have the F722 wing in mine, and I have the GPS and the flight controller in the same positions, but I don't have any problems with the GPS. Maybe it's a thing of the H743 because the higher CPU clock speed. I don't know.
Yeah, it's at 480 megahertz.
Yeah.
I have a full video that I actually posted in, I think it's Matexist in the forum, showing that every single one of the products is brutally noisy, but not all of them receive interference or make an interference at the right frequency to cancel the GPS signal.
Oh, okay.
Because just to give you an example, my Nano Goblin, I have the GPS antenna in that plane even closer to the controller, but it catches, you know, I can plug in the power, get out there, and get 12 satellites within 2 minutes.
Interesting. Well, fantastic.
While we were talking, Samantha asked in the chat if you connect the shielding to ground, and shielding doesn't have to be connected to ground. In some situations, it'll work just as well without being connected to ground, but for lots of things, it's better connected to ground. It's hard to explain exactly which situations those are, but you know, a safe rule is to always connect it to ground.
So, Marco, before we finish up with you here, I wanted to say that you said that you were up until this point, you were working with, was it Copilot to get it work your planes maidened?
Oh no! Before I use INAV and before I have, you know, the pleasure to start to work with my tech systems, I use my Flight Dream. My Flight Dream is a much more expensive product, and they even, whenever you purchase the products, they come fully shielded. Even the wiring is fully shielded. It is an incredibly good product. But I mean, you are paying almost 3 times as much as any of the Matec products. I have a few wings that I really thought that they were lost. I throw that switch for return home, and lo and behold, the plane is coming back. And I mean, we are talking about long before I have understanding and knowledge about PIDs and everything else, you know?
Yeah. So have you been playing with the newer version INAV 3 and INAV 4?
I have in the AR Wing Pro, I do have INAV 3.02.
Okay.
But most of the rest of the fleet is right now in 2.6.
Okay. So you switched over to 3.0, and how's it working out for you?
So far, it's very good. One of the few things that I have been dealing problems with, but it doesn't have nothing to do with the controllers or with the INAV. I have a switch that I think is defective in my plane, and sometimes it was going into navigation. It was going like if I was trying to set up the waypoints in the plane, in mid-flight, and it will go crazy.
Oh, is there the waypoints?
Yeah.
You're starting to do missions?
I just decided to change in the program in the radio and change the switch to a knob, and now I no longer have that problem.
Oh, so okay. Out of curiosity, when you brought your plane over to INAV 3.02, did you update the PIDs, or you just do a diff all and just copy that and then just bring it to INAV 3.02?
That is an excellent question. For a long time, I only purchased the F722 wing, only.
Yeah.
Because if I only have one controller, I only have one program, I only have one single issue that I can use copy and paste and change the settings for different planes, and everything will work perfectly. But whenever it came to the fact that they cancel and they stop the production of the 722 wing, I have no other option but to start to get different controllers. It works perfectly with the F411, the F411 WSE for the Nano Goblin. I literally copy and paste the CLI from this wing up here, and I put it in the little wing. It works perfectly.
Okay.
But when I went to 3.0, it was not going to work, and I have to do it manually, one step at a time.
Okay, so we're going to go away for a few minutes and come back, and Mark's going to be talking about that, because I think this is a problem people are having. Mark, can you say something?
Yeah, there's just one thing I wanted to add to the shielding stuff, because Daytona FPV in the chat just told me that you should never connect 2 points to a grounded shield, for example, and that's a good point, because you have to avoid ground loops. And I just recently, 1 or 2 weeks ago, learned what a ground loop actually is in our kind of electronics we use. So please bear with me if I have a little mistakes in there. So what you want is that every ground wire or every connection overall is connected in a star pattern, in the star pattern. So everything is centralized from the flight controller just straight away. You do not want to have a ground connection like from one end, like you have the flight controller, your GPS here, then you have your flight controller, and you have, for example, the ESC here. You don't want to have a ground connection between the GPS and the ESC, for example, because then you have a closed loop in the ground path, and this closed loop acts like an antenna for electrical noise.
Oh, interesting.
So if you then have a power cable running somewhere parallel or through this loop that is created, this loop will completely capture all the noise that is generated, and you will put that noise into your ground signal itself, or into your ground system. So that's what you should avoid. Yeah, wait a second, Sam. I will show the others. Really quick. Yeah, so this is how it should be like. Your ground is connected to flight controller, GPS, cam, and not in one chain or a close, or you should definitely
you don't want to take the ground
avoid
from the
closed loop
over to your speed controller, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and also avoid any loop, any kind of loop.
Any kind of loops.
Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. That's good to know. All right, but Mark, this is one thing I was hoping to get to. I think a lot of people are doing this, and this is the question to ponder. I think a number of people are coming in. They're taking their INAV 2.6, and they're doing a Autotune on that and getting to fly as best as possible. But it has its own PIDs when they set that up, and then they go to INAV 3.0 or INAV 4.0, and the PIDs are set up. Even though 4.0 you don't change the PIDs anymore, right? But so they're using old PIDs from a previous version, and then they're trying to do an Autotune. They're having problems with that. So
yeah, of course that can happen. I think if we talk about upgrading INAV and how or whether we should transfer the PIDs from one version to the other one, I think that's a little bit longer topic. Maybe we talk about that after the break.
Right. Perfect. So that would be the tease. We're going to come back and talk about. Mark's going to go over the big question of the day. How do you set up? How do you get going from Maiden all the way to an Autotune? What's the correct procedure now? Because it seems to be kind of confusing. So please come back to us. We'll be back in about 3 minutes. Hey, welcome back, everybody. Mark is going to talk now about how to get your plane set up for, getting from the initial maiden flight all the way to Autotune, what the correct procedures are.
So yeah, I mean, that should not be a complete tutorial, because usually that would be a 1 hour video or so. But just to make sure we have all the right steps, and for a successful maiden, of course, every step needs some more explanation, but we have videos about that on Darren's channel, on my channel. We have our fixed string group website where we have a guide to show it in detail. It's just from my experience, the order how to set it up correctly to get a successful maiden. And of course, Steve, can you mute yourself? I'm getting an echo. Just to make sure everything goes well up to the tuning point. So the first thing you have to do, of course, is setting up your plane, that the servos are moving, that you can arm your plane on the bench, of course, without a prop. And make sure, if you get any kind of manual from your manufacturer, how the throws of the control surfaces should be, take that and use these values. We just recently had a post in the wasn't the fixed string group or in the RC Rebels, I'm not sure right now, in one of the groups for sure.
It's fixed string group.
It was fixed string group, where someone had an F1 an Hearing F1, I think it was. That heavily oscillated in flight if he was in angle mode, I think. And then we asked for on INAV 4.0 default values, and when he showed us how much travel he had like 45 degrees control surface throw, with surfaces that are about 30% of the whole wing in size. So it was way too much. And that's why it's always important to follow your manufacturer guidelines on that.
Right, so this is the actual same wing, and the throws, I don't even know if I can get them on this. If it moves, it would help.
His servo horns were touching the foam for sure.
It was about that.
And that was just on one axis. If you go, if you went.
The manufacturer saying that it's the correct throws doesn't necessarily mean it's the correct throws, but it is a good starting point. Manufacturers often give very bad recommendations, but it's the best thing you have to go on.
I mean, at least the recommendations should not make your plane freak out usually. You are in a safe range, but you can go higher, of course. But that's a point where you have to go slowly and find the edge. That's the first point. Make sure everything is set up clean. Also do some load tests, like block your control surfaces and move the servos to see that nothing breaks, nothing is loose, and these are things you really have to check at the beginning. The next point, of course, the INAV setup. I think I won't go to explain that here in the live show right now. Everyone should know how that goes, that you check the control surface directions, first with the stick inputs, then in angle mode to just tilt your plane and see if the control surface is going the right direction. Rule of thumb it, the side that goes up, also the control surface has to go up in angle mode. That's the important point. So if that all works, then you can go for the auto launch. If you want to maiden with auto launch, there's nothing wrong anymore with that since INAV 3.0 or even 4.0. The default setting or the default pits are so reliable and so well refined that basically 99% of all planes should launch fine with them, as long as you give them a good and stable throw, of course. The auto launch settings, how to set them up, is also on the Fixed String Group website. There's a very long guide what every setting does. There's also a calculator on Darren's website, Mr. D Falling with Style, where you can get an estimation about your launch throttle value depending on your prop size, your motor KV, and so on. Yeah, the next step is just to get the plane in the air. What I always recommend is, especially with INAV 4.0, enable the continuous servo trim, so you don't have to deal with trimming the plane. INAV does that automatically for you. So you maiden your plane, you just fly around a little bit and do some phases where you just release the stick. No input in acro mode, no input in angle mode, doesn't really matter. And in this time where you don't do any input and don't do any maneuvers, INAV will trim your plane so the control surfaces are at the right point and at the right center point to fly stable. After that, you can directly go into Autotune. Autotune, as always, full stick inputs in each direction on roll and pitch. You could do it on yaw, but I really don't recommend that. Darren? I don't know what you mean.
Sorry, I'm muted. Only do it in acro.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. The Autotune should only be done in acro. You can do it in angle mode, but it won't work well and you will not get your rates tuned. And the tuning of the rates is one of the most important things of any plane tune, because if the rates are too high, INAV just doesn't know what it should do with the plane at all, especially in navigation modes. So yeah, Autotune, full stick input, just do it for a while. 1 minute or 2 minutes is a good time frame. Or you just put the PID values on, or the PIDFF values on your OSD to see when they stop to change or when they start to go up and down and balance out. After the Autotune, disable it, you land the plane, and then the next step would be to do a manual trim, a mechanical trim. So you reset your servo. First, you note where the control surfaces are in the neutral position now. If they are not completely off in one direction, everything is fine. So you reset the center points in the Outputs tab, and then you mechanically adjust the control surface to that position as a new neutral point. This is important just to have the same travel in each direction and don't lose resolution on your servos. It is not completely necessary, but trust me, the plane will fly better if you trim it mechanically. Yeah, and after that, we basically have a tuned plane. The PID values are not tuned in INAV 4.0 anymore. The reason for that is just that we in the community and also the developers realized we actually do not need PIDs at all on a wing. You could zero all of them out, just fly on feet forward. It would in theory work. We just want to have some pits to have additional stabilization to counteract wind gusts or turbulences and all that stuff. And you can just tune them for your personal liking. So if you want to have a more locked-in feel, you want to have sharp turns or sharp reactions on stick inputs, or even in navigation modes, if you want to have a sharp turn, then you set the P term higher. And of course also the D term to dampen it a little bit and have nice turn maneuvers or turn movements. And if you want it softer, so it goes smoother into turns, or if you want to have a gentle cruiser, you just keep the PID values as they are on default. That's totally fine.
I-term. If you've got no I-term, servo continuous auto trim won't work.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, with the continuous servo trim needs the actual I-term of the flight controller, of the pit controller to work. Marco, you wanted to say something?
Well, I was asking about I-term because in 2.1 up to 2.5, I was working with I-term, in order to have a stabilization all the time, and I will literally go manual in the precise moment when I will be putting in inputs in the radio.
Yeah, the iTerm or the main focus of the iTerm is to keep your plane at its current attitude when you release the sticks. So if your trims are off, for example, and you go into a side roll like 45 degree and you release the sticks, the iTerm will lock the plane into this position. That's the main reason for the iTerm. It also, if you do a long roll or a long loop, will help to keep a constant rotation rate on the equivalent axis, but it shouldn't do that because the iTerm has the downside that it causes strong bounce backs. So if the iTerm is too high and you make like a full roll, 360 degree roll, and you suddenly stop with your stick, the plane will like bounce back and move back to a previous position, and that happens when the iTerm is too high. So a few months ago I made a INAV manual tuning video where I explained that in detail. The iTerm should be as low as possible, and just high enough to counteract things like torque roll or trim offsets during speed changes. So like you fly slow and then you suddenly go full throttle. If the plane pitches down or up or rolls during this full throttle acceleration, then you just raise the iTerm a little bit, but not higher than necessary. That's always important. So the lower the iTerm is, the more direct the plane will feel at the end. And the more you go into a manual flight feeling, for example.
Okay.
So what else about tuning? Yeah, I think the manual pit tune is explained in the manual tuning guide video already. Any questions from you guys at this point?
Well, I just wanted to see, but what I brought up before was, is it possible that someone could do a bad tune in a bad PID tune in INAV 2.6, for example, and drag it over to INAV 4.0? There's a real benefit of just kind of sticking with the defaults, right?
Yeah, if you have a bad tune in 2.6 or older, or even in 3.0, because 3.0 still does a bad tuning basically, because it also ramps up the P or I terms, especially on very slow or very gentle planes. You can take that over to 4.0. It will fly the same, but it will likely fly not as good as it could do actually. Because if you then go to a 4.0 and you do the Autotune again, the bad PID values will stay. They will not change anymore. And the problem is that because of the PID controller, especially the P and the I term, helping with the controls and also pushing into the direction, the feed forward value at the end will be tuned too low if the if P and I are very high. So it will basically mess with your auto-tune later. So that's why we always recommend, if you update from any older version to 4.0 or 4.1, load the defaults and just start another auto-tune. I would say in 90 to 95% of all cases, the plane will fly better afterwards. Unless of course, if someone used my tuning guide, for example, with INAV 2.6 or 3.0, it will work the same. And if it's completely manual tuned, then of course you can keep the tune and don't have to start all over again.
Right, but if you have a wonky tune coming off of INAV 2.6 or 3.0, just get rid of it and start fresh with the default PIDs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's good to know. Hey, Darren. Are you ready for your presentation?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a massive presentation, but it's something that people have been sort of moaning at me about and that I should have had ready a few months ago. But yeah, we have these OpenTX transmitter models in the group, and for about, I think it's even 2 years, they've not been updated. So just before this Wing Talk went live, there's a new version on the website. So we have a version 3 standard model, version 2 Pro model. They are now ready for INAV 3 or 4, whichever you want to use them with. They have all the correct sounds. They, trying to think what I've done to them. So yeah, they're updated for 3 or 4. All the CLI is correct for that. There's extra safety in there, so the trims now only work on manual mode. There's a few little tweaks for model images and default sounds. There's a complete new sound pack. It's not included with the model anymore. You download it separately because it will update a lot more quickly. And oh yeah, the little one is ready for Express LRS as well. So yeah, all of them support hybrid 8 mode and wide mode. So they are ready to go, ready to use.
Yeah, I noticed I put the sound pack in, and like the voices have changed a little bit as far as arm. You should say arm.
Yeah, it now says arming because that is more realistic. At the end of the day, INAV is what decides when it's armed or not. So all we're doing is requesting that we want it to arm. But if INAV says it can't arm because it's in a navigation mode or hasn't got GPS lock, then it's not technically armed. So, but yeah, the voice has, every single sound has been redone. I've used the same voice. I've normalized the sound level, so all the sound levels should be a lot more consistent. So yeah, that's new from the ground up, but the names are the same, so it should all just work straight away. Just replace all the files that you have on your transmitter already.
Also, the voices sound like they have a British accent.
It did last time. It's always had a British accent, but it's a better voice pack now, so it's more
distinct sounding. It sounds really nice. So I was flying with it. I was like, oh, this is nice. Definitely improvement.
Yeah, Mark introduced me to Aria, and it's just another voice in that sound pack, and yeah, it's a lot more natural sounding. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. But then but the switch layouts are all pretty much the same from the standard pack, and
yeah, as far as the switches look and feel, it's identical. Because of the Express LRS stuff, the packs aren't backwards compatible, so it's not easy to do an update. So on some folder, you got your fan on. Yeah, so in the past I've tried to do like an update.
Steve, you have the wrong microphone right now. You have a loud rattling. Don't unmute.
But yeah, so I've tried to do an update path, but with this, where the Express LRS Hybrid 8 stuff needed quite a few changes, it's not really an upgradable option. You can, obviously, if you've not changed the original packs, just take your receiver number and put it on the new pack and it will work. But yeah, there's a few options. With the Pro model, if you're using Hybrid 8 Express LRS, you do only get 15 adjustments for in-flight tuning. If you use the wide hybrid mode, you get all 21 or all 20. So there's not much difference there. But I had to make those sacrifices to get it to work on Hybrid 8. But all the instructions are on the website.
Does it sound better?
Yeah,
Yes.
much better. So and there's one small change also in the manual tuning portion. So we have a rearrangement, and I think we have also the HD version of the tuning OSD. Is it included? Yeah.
Yes, it's included. So, yeah, Mark has rearranged the order. There's also extra stuff, so the profile is displayed on there. So, yeah, you have the INAV version displayed, you have a profile displayed. It's a slightly different layout, and there is the HD0 canvas mode layout as well. If you do want to use the hybrid 8 switches, there is an additional CLI which just changes the adjustments that you can use. It doesn't actually change the OSD, so some elements will be unused, but they'll just get skipped over. And yeah, there's something else that I've been working on, which was a big thing that Steve was looking to get, and that is the line of sight model. So we will have an INAV fixed wing group line of sight model soon. Steve is going to be testing it pretty soon, obviously, because of, I don't know.
Yeah, I tested it today.
Cool.
So check it out. It was actually excellent. But the only thing, so what happens with it is you have a choice. If you put a GPS unit in it, you get return to home, and you get, I guess, anything that involves navigation as far as stabilized flights, where it's like the what is that, the cruise?
Yeah, all that's not on there. Basically, we've tried to keep it as sort of pure as possible. So I've tried to make it mimic a stabilizer with extra features. So there are basically 2 or 3 switches on it. So you have switch SA is manual, acro, or angle. These are pretty much the modes you get on stabilizers. So you'll get a fully manual mode, a stabilized mode, and a self-leveling mode. So that's on one switch. There's the momentary switch. If you're armed, it's assuming you're flying, and that will act as an O crap switch. So if you're in manual or acro, as soon as you hit that O crap switch, it's in angle, so it will self-level. If you're landed, it's a timer reset, so it does different things depending on whether you're armed or disarmed. The GPS is recommended for it all anyway, because of the other functionality. On the second switch, which is the SD, so it's the opposite side, going down is return to home. So you'll find there's some similarities between that, the standard model. So the standard OpenTX model we have has basic modes on SA, and it has return to home on SD, same as the Pro model. The difference with SD is if you go up, it's actually a geofence mode. So you can customize the geofence parameters. It's all in the document that will obviously go live when it's ready. And that will basically give you an upper and lower altitude limits and a distance limit. And if you go past that, it enables return to home, turns the model around and flies back to you, or sort of pitches up. So that's the basics of the line of sight model. There's no OSDs or anything like that, and it's tried to be kept simple. Again, the trims are only active in manual. So line of sight pilots obviously are used to trimming manually. So if they trim in manual and then switch to a stabilized mode, the trims instantly deactivate, so INAV doesn't freak out. So, and also there's auto trim and auto tune. Oh, sorry, auto tune and auto level for setting up the plane. If they choose to use that, I mean, obviously they should do an auto tune. So there's again guidance for that. If they do an auto tune in flight, it will automatically save when they land. So that's all good.
Oh yeah, it's brilliant. So I think the big selling point there is that what a lot of people are asking for is like they want to fly in manual. Line of sight pilots, you know, I'm sure that Marco can agree with this as well. You know, the first thing you do is you take the plane out to fly, and then you start in manual, and then you start changing the trims, and it changes day by day how the weather is and everything else. And because of that, a lot of people will not want to get away from having something that's completely controlled by a flight controller. So manual is completely manual like they're used to. But once you flip the switch, then all of a sudden all the trims in manual go away, and you're back into the flight modes where, like, I like flying in acro mode, and flew great in that. I also checked out, you said that there's the oh crap switch. It's a momentary switch. You push it, and what it says is angle mode. But, you know, it's, you know, I did give it a try, and it works great. So the idea is that a lot of people who fly Spectrum in particular, they like the AS3X where they can try to, it's kind of like they're flying within a, for the first time, they'll take the plane out of the AS3X stabilized mode and they'll put it into manual. And all of a sudden, the plane starts to veer off to start swirling left, and they push the button, and all of a sudden, the plane will start to self-level again. And, you know, I played with that on AS3X and a Spectrum radio a long time ago, and I tried it with this, and it works exactly the same. So it's brilliant. And so that's really nice. I also work with Return to Home.
Sorry, we should highlight that it also will have the same problems that the AS3X has. So, for example,
it crashes by itself.
Well, yeah, exactly. So if you stall the plane, the self-leveling mode isn't going to help you. It will actually probably do the opposite and make it worse. The only way to get out of self-level a stall is manual, and let the plane ride itself and pull out. If you are in a self-leveling mode, it will do all the wrong things. So it's the same with any stabilizer on the market. So it's one of those things. But as far as the functionality goes, it's sort of mimicking everything else. But plus they can use the Lua script with it, so they can actually see what's going on with the plane if they want to. They can get all the alerts. So there are benefits to doing it, and it is also a progression into making it FPV later on.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And about the only thing that I would say that people might have a difficult time with is that since you've lost, if you're not using goggles, what we probably need to do is you can set up on your LEDs so that when one of the modes is that they start out blinking red or being red when you first get the plane going. And then when it finds satellites, you'll see each time it finds a satellite, it flashes green for a second and then it stays red. Then finally, when you get all 6 satellites, it turns green. So that's the kind of thing. It's very inexpensive to get those hooked up to your plane, and that might be the way to work around it as opposed to putting goggles on, to knowing if you're using a GPS unit, which I'd highly recommend using. I did check out the Return to Home. It worked fine. What it did was I was flying too low, and I put it in Return to Home, so it started flying upwards, and then finally it started to go in the pattern, and it worked great.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, as you said, because you haven't got goggles, it's harder to know when it's ready to fly, but you can use LEDs, as you mentioned. You can use the Lua script, which will tell you when it's ready to fly. You could use an OLED screen. There's plenty of options. So, yeah.
And then the other thing, the big thing that, I mean, we really should mention is complete telemetry. So with that Lua script, a lot of times, if you were to go in there with the Spectrum radio and pay for all the stuff to get all the telemetry, the battery readings, and everything else like that, it's quite expensive. So that, and plus you can dial in the stabilization to your liking with INAV versus just one size fits all with Spectrum. So that makes it worthwhile. All in all, it's brilliant. It should be ready fairly soon, I would say.
Yeah. Basically, we'll just iron out the tweaks and then get it live as soon as we can.
Okay. Yeah. And the trainer. So, where was the trainer switch at?
The trainer is opposite Return to Home. So you've got SD in the middle is off, down is Return to Home, up is trainer. So,
got it. And the idea of a trainer is that and this is something that Marc came up with, is that you get someone new in the club who wants to learn how to fly, and I'm sorry about my dogs barking, by the way. When they want to learn how to fly, they're going to, the thing that you worry about is them flying, either crashing into the ground or flying so high that they fly away, or that they fly out of sight and they can't see the plane anymore. So what happens is, there's a floor and then there's a ceiling as far as this mode is concerned. So you can't go below a certain altitude and you can't go above a certain altitude. And if you fly too far away, default is 500 meters, which might be a little too far for a lot of fields. The plane will hit Return Home, come back.
Yeah. I mean, in the instructions, it's got how you can modify them. And there's actually 2 parameters for each. So we have the ceiling, which is the altitude it will go up to, and then there's sort of the when it will disengage, return to home afterwards. So it will actually give it time to make the corrective adjustment rather than just going over it and then just coming back. That was especially important, I think, for the geofence. If you get at a shallow angle, it needs to actually be coming back in and towards yourself. I've not played with it yet, but maybe I'll be able to get a wing wobble or something in there just to say that it's about to return control. That's something that I could look into. With regards to the lower, the floor, there is a setting in that to allow people to be able to land. So there is a distance away from home where you can go below that floor level, because otherwise if there's someone there trying to learn to land and it just says, right, no, you're going straight back up again, it's not really a good training tool. So you can set a distance away from home where you can go below that altitude. Of course, if they are brand new, you can set that to 1 meter. So unless it's at their feet, they can't go below the floor. So there's plenty of customizability in there. But yeah, I'll see if I can get that wing wobble in there. That might be quite cool.
And I'm part of a club, so occasionally we get people who show up and they want to fly for the first time. And what I'm going to probably do is set up a nice Bixler 2 for the club, and then this will be the plane that I take out, put that on there, and let them know, like, you can't crash this plane.
Well, you can.
So I know that it sounds like funny, but reality, people get freaked out, like, I'm going to crash the club plane and people are going to hate me. And so when I let them know, like, you can't go below a certain altitude, you can't go above a certain altitude, and if you fly too far away, it comes back. Plus, I'll probably hit the return to home switch before it gets that far away. Then the idea is, like, once you start understanding the loops, and then once you're in this, you can also go into angle mode, right?
Sure. Trainer is just angle mode. So as soon as you put it into trainer, it locks it into angle mode. So they can't overbank, they can't pitch up and down too much.
Okay. Yeah. So that means it's nice and smooth. What I've noticed a lot of times, people have what I call video game hands, where they start off and they start really, when things go south, what they start to do is they start to way overcorrect. So if you're just a little bit off as far as deflection on your stick, and all of a sudden it's not doing what you want, the next thing you know, you're pushing the stick all the way over. And if you've got fast servos, the plane's starting to do rolls or stuff like that. So that's why angle mode makes the most sense for that.
Yeah. And also, you'd sort of think that if they're competent enough that they can control the plane, turn it around, they're ready to go on to acro anyway. So the trainer mode in itself isn't really needed so much if they can progress on past angle anyway. Perfect. So going further away, they can always enable return to home, and the rest of it they should be competent enough to handle.
Instead of telling them that they can't crash the plane, maybe you should instead tell them that they can, but if they do, it's Darren's fault, not theirs.
Yeah, I'm not mentioning anything about not being able to crash planes. I take no responsibility. I think you can crash anything. It's just how well you crash it.
Fantastic. Hey, Luke, it's your turn. What are we going to talk about today?
BL Heli and BL Heli settings, all of that fun stuff.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
So yeah, what do you want me to start with?
Well, one of the questions I think that people have is, like, for example, I have one BL Heli that seems setting that works for me, which is the BL Heli. It's the multi-shot, one shot. I use one shot 125. And
you mean on INAV you use one shot 125?
No, in the BL Heli settings. Oh, actually, yeah, in INAV, one shot 125.
Yeah.
And so, but there's a lot of other settings. So why are there all these other settings? Do they make sense for INAV fixed wing planes?
Okay, so that's a great one to start with, the communication setting. As far as I'm aware, and Mark can probably fill me in on this a bit more, the best communication protocol to use for BL Heli ESCs at the moment is DShot 150. It'll give you telemetry and all of that stuff, and it's the slowest rate that will allow you to use telemetry, so you don't have to worry as much about interference and those sorts of problems. Is that correct, Mark?
It's correct so far, but keep in mind that the telemetry only works in INAV with the separate telemetry wire. So not on BA Heli S, only on BA Heli 32.
Yes, yeah, and if you don't use DShot as your control signal for the ESC, you instead have to use, well, if you use PWM, for example, you instead have to use auto telemetry, which I think INAV still supports, doesn't it? So yeah, but that's not optimal. You want to be using DShot if you're using telemetry with BL Heli ESCs. So yeah, that's a good starting point. Another thing that you should always have disabled with INAV is throttle calibration enable. You want that unticked. That's so that you can do throttle range calibration. It's good if you know you're setting your throttle range not manually in INAV, but it's on a transmitter or whatever. But with INAV, you can set it exactly to what you set it to in BL Heli, so you don't need that. So actually, could I share my screen, Mark?
Mark's
I
muted.
can't hear you, Mark.
Mark muted. No.
Yeah, sure. Just share your screen, and I will share my screen then, so everyone can see it.
Oh no. Oh, it's that one. Okay, there we go. Can you see that?
Yep.
Perfect. I can even make it full screen. Yeah, so the first of the settings is ramp up power. People may think this is something to do with how vigorously the motor will accelerate or something like that, but it's not. This is purely how much power will be put to the motor when you're trying to start it. That doesn't really have any bearing on how quickly it'll start up. The main difference is it will determine how much the coils are magnetized on startup. And one of the biggest causes of desyncs is latent magnetization of the coils. So if you over-magnetize them, then the latent magnetization problem is bigger, and that's particularly prevalent at low RPMs. So if you set ramp up power lower, you have less chance of desyncs on startup. Yes, Mark?
Just one addition. The ramp up power is not only for startup from a still standing motor, it's also the power from slow spinning to full throttle, for example.
Exactly, yeah.
Just to make that clear for the people.
It's only low RPM, so if you're already at half throttle and you go up to full throttle, it doesn't take effect. I don't know the exact cutoff. It may be something like 10%, or it may be done as an RPM. But yeah, it's only it's not just from no spinning at all, it's from low RPMs as well. Generally, keeping that 50% default value is good, but if you find you're having desyncs from low throttle values, making it lower can help. Alternatively, if you have a very low RPM motor, you may want to turn the power up because it may be detecting it as being in that low power state and not giving it full power. Similar to that, low RPM power protect also to help with latent magnetization on startup, but not particularly for ramping up power, but just in steady state power. Again, lower is better. So if if you turn it on, it's better. But with low RPM motors, low kV with low voltage, you may have the same problems. So keep an eye on that. Otherwise, keep it on. Low voltage protection, pretty self-explanatory. For FPV, we don't want it. We can see our battery voltage and manage that ourselves. Temperature protection, pretty self-explanatory as well. Good to keep it on at a safe number. 140 degrees is a good option. Related to that is current protection. It is useful if you're setting up a new plane, you have no idea how much power you're going to draw. you know, if you're worried that you may pull 100 amps through a 40 amp ESC, you can put it on at say 60 amps, and then you know you're not just going to instantly blow your ESC. But generally, I prefer to keep it off and use a temperature protection as a way to protect the ESC. Sine modulation mode helps the motor run smoother. You do get slight.
Marco wants to say something.
Sorry.
Marco, you're muted.
Marco, we don't hear you.
You're muted right now.
Yeah.
Maybe Marco, can you type your question out and we'll read it?
Yeah, if you type it in the chat, I'll read it out and answer it if I know the answer. I'll carry on until then. Sine modulation mode. If you imagine for each phase or each coil of the motor, it turns the coil on. You get, you know, a period where it's on. Well, instead, if you have sine modulation mode, it makes that on period a curve. This reduces your overall power because you now chop off the area under this curve is how much power you have, and you chop off those edges. However, it makes the motor run smoother and quieter. I think Marco's back. Oh,
Marco, you can speak now. We can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Before the end of this forum, time is getting really close for us to finish. I would like to request that there will be some kind of small tutorial to set up the reverse motor for wings. Use it as a brake, as an air brake.
Yeah, see, that's actually something that I don't know about. I've used it lots, and I use it on actually most of my planes. However, this may be a bit shameful, but the most recent INAV version I'm currently using is 2.4. I know that things in that field have changed in later INAV versions, so I don't know what the status is with the more recent INAV versions.
There's also a problem right now in INAV. I'm not sure if it fixed already in 4.1, but there's basically a critical bug if you have a two-directional motor setup or two-directional ESC setup, and you use auto launch at the beginning with idle throttle. Idle throttle starts at 0 or at 1000 microsecond PWM and slowly ramps up the throttle to your idle value. But INAV, but if you have a two-directional ESC setup,
full reverse.
It will start full reverse and then go at lower power, and that can be a little bit dangerous. And that's one of the reasons why we haven't done that yet, and why I also haven't worked on that yet until this issue is actually fixed. Because currently using two-directional ESC with auto launch in combination can be dangerous. You have to set some things very special to get that work.
Yeah, even on, so I have a mixture of planes, and I have 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and 2.4. And on one of them, when I go into return to home or any auto modes, the motor's going to full reverse. And I haven't quite worked out why that is. I just don't use the auto modes. But yeah, the other ones, the other INAV planes, it works fine, but not that one.
Yeah.
So it's a bit hit and miss. Once that's sorted out, yeah, good to make a guide on it since it's very useful.
Marco? What? Anything?
Was Mark?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, you're welcome. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for that. Yeah, so sine modulation mode. If you want a smoother running motor that's quieter, then turn it on. If you're more bothered about max power, keep it off. S-bus channel is pretty unrelated to INAV. That's if you're trying to drive it instead of PWM or D-shot or one-shot, and you want to drive with S-bus instead. Quite self-explanatory. You just turn it on and then you get your channel selection. Motor directions, this is what we were just talking about. You get normal, reversed, bidirectional 3D, bidirectional 3D reversed, and then you get the soft modes, so bidirectional soft and bidirectional soft reversed. I've not ever particularly noticed a difference between the bidirectional and bidirectional soft. But I'm sure that it is slightly smoother. That's certainly what the documentation says. Demag compensation. This goes back to what I was talking about with the latent magnetization. This allows for desync detection. So when the speed controller notices that it doesn't know the position of the motor, it's had a desync. It'll stop driving the motor for a set period of time, determined by the slider, so a low period of time or a high period of time, or of course no period of time, so that it can then kill all of the magnetization of the coils and work out where the motor is again. Motor timing. Lower motor timings generally give you less power but better efficiency. Higher motor timings give more power but less efficiency. Higher motor timings also help with latent magnetization for somewhat complex reasons, but because essentially you're making things happen faster, so earlier, so although it's taken the same amount of time for the coils to demagnetize, that's earlier in the phase as well, so it doesn't overlap into the next phase as much. So yeah, generally leave that on 15 or whatever the default is. Maximum acceleration. Now this is an option that I use a lot, and I think it's a bit of a shame that it's not talked about very often. I always keep mine for most cruising planes and that kind of thing at 0.2% per millisecond. What this means is that your motor will take half a second to ramp from 0 throttle to full throttle. It's not a big thing, but unless you actually have an application where you need to be able to get full throttle quicker than half a second, which is possible with 3D flying and that kind of thing. In my opinion, it's a much better idea to have the acceleration lower, and then you're not shock loading, your motor, you're not shock loading, even just the motor mounts and that kind of thing. You're not putting as much stress on the ESC, so on and so on.
I think I think that's especially helpful for folding propellers that have more mass and more inertia.
Yeah, for folding propellers, definitely. Yeah, I mean, if you have a big folding propeller with a big spinner, yeah, why put the extra stress on stuff unless you really need it? And that works for deceleration too. If you're doing reversing motion, this is where I found out about it. It becomes very critical. Because in the reversing portion, it becomes very violent, and I've ripped many motor mounts off with reversing. So if you set your maximum acceleration down to something reasonable, it's sorts it out completely. Current sense calibration is to calibrate the current sensor, so you can use Darren's current sense calculator. It's not exactly what it's designed for, but it can be used, or you can use that to help you set it correctly. But generally not too much of a problem. I found they come pretty well calibrated, only a few % out normally. Unfortunately, it doesn't have offset calibration, only gain calibration. Telemetry, that is what we were talking about with D-Shot versus PWM drive and getting telemetry back from the ESC. If you're using D-Shot, leave it off. If you're using PWM and you want telemetry, you have to turn it on. S-port physical ID is for if you're plugging the ESC directly into a FreeSky receiver, so you can turn it on and then set the ID. I use it quite a lot. I have quite a lot of planes that don't have INAV on board, and it's great to be able to get battery voltage, RPM, current, and ESC temperature without needing anything else. Minimum throttle and maximum throttle, they can just be left as they are. If you have a specific reason, you may want to increase them to get more resolution, but generally not needed. And if you turn on motor direction, then you also have the center throttle, but again, that can be left unless you need something else. Brake on stop for fixed wing. This is almost always wants to be on and on fully. This means that this only works this only applies for when the throttle is at 0. But it stops the propeller, so folding props or for pushers, so so it's less likely to break the prop. It's perfect. non-damped mode. Oh, yeah, Mark.
I just want to add one thing to the brake because it often gets confused. The brake is not a propeller lock. It's not locking the propeller in any position. It's only giving resistance. So if you are very fast, the propeller will still slowly spin, but the faster it spins, the more resistance it will get. It will be like a short on the motor. So if you land, you have to still land slow to make the propeller completely stop. And that's the reason why, especially on flying wings, the propeller usually stops in the horizontal position and not vertical, so you cannot break it.
Yeah, exactly. Non-damped mode is what would have previously been called damped light, or also known as active freewheeling. So this is essentially regenerative braking. If you have it on, then it won't regeneratively brake, or it won't use active freewheeling. If you have it off, it will. This allows for the propeller to slow down actively. So, similar to brake on stop, but that only works at 0 throttle. This works at all throttle percentages. If you're using lithium ions, particularly high internal resistance lithium ions, you may want to turn this off so you don't have high voltage spikes. Yeah, a bit more of a complex topic, but this can almost always be used. Stall protection, again, this is due to demag compensation, similar sort of thing. Generally keeping it on normal is fine. Startup beep volume, pretty self-explanatory. Beacon signal volume, pretty self-explanatory, same as beacon delay. And then PWM frequency, low and high. I can't remember what I have to change to make these. Sine modulation off, yes. So when you have sine modulation off, you can set PWM frequency low and high. This is only really used for quads. It's so that they can have good damping, active freewheeling to reduce the RPM quickly, while still having high frequencies, because having high frequency drives reduce your ability to brake the propeller. While still having the high frequencies, which is good for motor smoothness and that sort of thing. And then the music editor, again, quite self-explanatory. And that's about it.
It's funny you say the music editor is self-explanatory. For me, it's the best feature on any ESC.
Using the music, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just recently, during the last days, as I told before, I have updated all my quads and I flashed all my BA Heli S ESCs to Blue Jay, just because I can now finally use startup melodies on BA Heli S ESCs.
Yeah, all of my planes I have BL Heli 32 on, they do have startup melodies. Most of them, the Imperial March or Mario or something similar.
Okay. So, hey, Lou, thanks for that. Really appreciate it. That was really, that's something I'm going to have to go back and watch over again.
Yeah, maybe it would have been better as a separate video or something. I realized about halfway through it's quite monotonous, but
no. It's just like there's so much good information, and there's so many things I really wanted to know about in there that I really wanted to, we'll watch it before setting up the next one, because that is BL Heli is a big mystery to me, other than the beacon sounds and then the motor. The brakes and everything else like that, but it does work great.
Anand in the chat just asked, we need an official INAV tune.
You shook me all night long.
So
where'd my plane go?
Maybe we have a musician in the group who can make a official INAV jingle we can then put on the ESCs.
I like that. All right, so tips and tricks. We're going to close out here. We asked everyone to get their tips and tricks, and Samantha was very good about coming up with a few of them. So I'm going to read a few of hers. First one says, I built a device to power up the GPS units in advance to power up before I power up the flight controller. what that does is then Willfly bought out the same thing. Runs at 2S to 4S, steps down to 5 volts. I guess what she's doing is she's plugging a GPS into 5 volts so that the GPS can find satellites, warm up before you can actually, plug in your flight controller. So that's kind of a cool idea. Have you seen that before, Mark?
No, wait. I have not seen that before. But
wait. So she's holding it up. Can you flip it over to her?
Yeah, I have already.
Okay.
So yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, on my Matic flight controllers, I make sure that I put the GPS always on a 4.5 volt line, so I can power it via USB or with the SpeedyB adapter, for example, before I plug in the battery. Especially if I know that I have a slow GPS in the plane. That's how I usually get my fix first, and then I plug in the battery and I can remove the USB, and the GPS holds the satellites.
Okay, so number 2, RSSI antenna tracker to stop doing the Stevie Wonder when flying behind the goggles. We're looking around. Where my plane go? It's like because you're flying and you have these your antennas on. So she's using an antenna tracker instead of the antennas on her goggles. She had all the details are in GitHub. It's not an Arcbird by any stretch of the imagination. It's dumb. She's holding it up right now. Can you show it? So I think Mark's switching over right now. Okay, that's cool. Look at that. So this is on GitHub somewhere. I like that. It's a tracker. Okay, simplified tracker. Cool, very much. The third one here is I have a notebook with all my pinouts from I think every board I have ever used, every GPS puck, every VTX. This lives in my flight bag. It's all hand drawn. It's my various OpenTX settings I use for Copilot and whatever else. So it's a nice little book she put together, and she keeps it with her at all times. So it's cool. And then last thing she says, laminate everything. She means it. If it's not laminated, laminate it. It's cheap. Travel iron will do. And she just really loves lamination.
I like ironing. That's what it is.
You like ironing. All right. So that's the one you're like not into chick things, but that's the one chick thing you'll do, right? Okay. It's ironing. So what that means is if you live in the UK, send your planes over to Samantha. She'll iron them all for you and bring them over. All right. She gets to crash them first, and you don't get to. You can put them back together. Okay. So thank you for those tips. Marco, you have a few tips you can share with us. I think he's on mute again.
You are muted. You're muted. You have to unmute first.
Sometimes he falls out. All right, so we'll get back to Marco in a second. When you unmute, let us know. Okay, Darren, do you have any tips and tricks for the month?
Well, one of them sort of Mark covered in the auto-tune or tuning guide, and that is getting the control surface throws right. If it doesn't fly right in manual, it's not going to fly great in INAV. So make sure that you have the correct throws for the plane. And I know it's a pain because a lot of FPV manufacturers don't include them, which is really bad. And if they do, sometimes they're not tested, as sort of Luke pointed out. But if you look at old sort of traditional planes, there was always a low rates, a high rates, and a nice range that it will work well in. So it'd be great if FPV manufacturers could start including stuff like that. And then especially people who are really new can actually set the throws correctly. Another tip and
you have a great video on that as well, which I absolutely love.
Yeah, I'm not plugging myself though. It's just people need to do it so they don't crash.
Yeah.
Or have planes that are like they're on a jackhammer. This one I'm stealing from Andrew Newton. If you get manuals for your planes, put them in a ring binder. So I've got all the manuals for my planes in here, which is similar to Sam's tip. And if I've got the flight controller, I'll actually write on the manual what UART goes to which. So it's all here in the folder. But yeah, I think everything else that I could think of has been covered.
Perfect. Awesome. Luke, do you have anything? No? Okay.
Oh,
Mark.
no, sorry, I was muted. Covered it pretty well.
Covered it pretty well. Well, you did a great job with explaining BL Heli, so I really appreciate that. Mark, you have a few tips.
Yeah, one tip is actually a tool tip. I've recently made a video about the flight log to Google Earth, where you can take your flight logs from INAV or from your OpenGX radio to show them in Google Earth with the command line application. And the developer, Stronach, was so thrilled from how I was explaining it and all that stuff, and I was talking to him. Maybe we could have a user interface, a graphical user interface in the future. And what he did was a whole programming night, and he came up with this tool. Let me share it on Skype too.
It works really well, by the way. It's so easy.
Yeah. So that's this tool. Flight log to X user interface. So everything you do is you start the tool. It's for Linux and it's for Windows, and that's a really special thing if Stronach makes a Windows application. And you just open it, you click on log, you load your logs. You can even load multiple ones. You can set a few settings. You can even load a mission file, like if you flew an INAV mission before. You can use the mission and the log together and put them as a merged graph into a KML file, and then you can just open it in Google Earth, and you can show different color patterns, like for your RSSI, for your altitude, for your even for your efficiency, and you can compare your waypoint mission with the actual flight path of the plane. And that's a really, really fantastic tool for flight analysis afterwards.
All right, so do you have a link for this you're going to share?
Yeah, of course. I will put this share in the chat right now. This is really, really helpful.
It is. It looks like a great tool. I've seen you work with it before. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, I believe that I am capable to talk one more time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, my two tips will be the first one. Try to put susceptible peripherals to electronic noise as far as humanly possible from your controller.
Mark, I think you're still in the desktop.
Yep.
What happened?
All good.
Now we can see you. Go ahead.
Okay. Right here is my controller. Right here is my GPS. There is a great deal of distance right there between those two. And my receiver is also on the tip of the wing all the way over here.
So separation is what you're talking about.
Yeah, put distance between them. And I have my 1.3 gigahertz over here and the other tip of the wing on the other side.
Interesting. Cool. Yeah. That's always the best advice. Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so that's tip number one. And the other tip is?
Number two is this is the way that I make my gimbals. My gimbals very much are just a simple El Cheapo servo. One of the cheapest possible servos that I pull out the potentiometer outside.
Potentiometer, right. Yeah.
Yeah, and with a simple setup, I am capable to set up a 360-degree servo to mount, and it actually have a quarter 20 screw that allow me to perfectly mount it, any type of camera mounting on there.
Wow.
Those are my two tips for today.
Two tips today. Cool. Thank you.
So if I understand that correctly, you use an external potentiometer that's actually spinning together with the camera and not inside the servo. So you use the servo only as a motor, basically.
Correct.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's a cool tip. And then the cheap servos, those things, how often do they break? The little plastic ones?
Yeah, I think like he uses it with the big and the with the strong gearing. It shouldn't be a problem. I don't think that it will break that easy.
All right, so
Gentlemen,
go ahead.
my time is over. I apologize to leave you alone,
Okay.
but I have responsibilities. So
Well,
I
thanks
will
for joining
be.
us today, Marco. Really appreciate it.
No, I really enjoyed this time, and I hope that we can do it one more time in the future.
Sounds perfect. We're about to wrap up anyways. So
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
all right. So I only have a few tips. One was it's kind of similar to what Samantha did. What I do is I take the flight controller. Mine's a little different. I use Google Drive. And I'll tell you why I use Google Drive. I'll go into clip out a flight controller. I'll go to the Maytech website, for example, if I use one of their flight controllers. And what I'll do is I'll use the clipping tool in Windows, and I'll clip out a photo of the flight controller, and then you can draw on it. So you can draw which pins you use, and then you can copy that photo. So one will say like VTX, one will say TX for transmitter, and one will be for GPX, VTX, smart audio. And so then all I'll do is take that photo and drop it into Google Drive, and I'll discuss all the different pin settings. The reason I'm liking on Google Drive is from your cell phone, you could be out in the field, and if one of your pins comes unplugged, you can look really quick on there. You can see where it goes into, photographically where it plugs back into, and so right away you can identify and put it back in. The other thing I also will mention is that most of the time people play with 3-pin servos. So it's the red, black, white wire servos. You can order these things up to like 6 pins. So the benefit of that is, like, if you have a flight controller, if you like using pins like I do, if you're using 4 pins, for example, you can put the whole GPS on one setup as opposed to trying to work it some other way. You can actually, with 6 pins, you can sometimes 2 different 3-pin rows put together, like servos, for example, you go in, makes things a lot simpler. So I highly recommend them. You can get those off of AliExpress, and you just look around. They're called 5P, DuPont 5P, 6P headers. Let's see. One of the other tip I would recommend is put your name and phone number on your planes. And if you're kind of somewhat worried about putting your name and phone number on your plane, what you can do is you can go to Google and get yourself a free phone number from them, and then you can put someone else's name on it and use your Google phone number on there, and someone will call and leave you a message, and you call back and say, hey, this is Hank. I heard you found my plane. Yeah, it's at the airport. And then, okay, I'm never going to talk to you again. Say goodbye to that plane. And then my last tip is that I highly believe is, I just bought this recently. It's this is my favorite one. I got this one off of Hobby King. For me, this is the one that works the best. Simple little prop balancer. It was probably $5 for this. Spend 20 minutes, get your prop balanced. I mean, really take your time. I used to like to put tape on the props. Now I'm sanding them down and taking alcohol, rubbing them off. Get your props balanced, because it makes all the difference in the world as far as flying. And one of the big problems we're having in INAV is too much vibration on the planes, and because of that, it screws with your gyros. So a prop balancer, inexpensive, and you set it up. I know, especially planes that have rear, like a Bixler or a Ranger, where you put a prop on there, 5 years later, you're still using the same prop because it just never breaks. Definitely worthwhile. Get yourself a good quality prop. Okay, so is there anything else I wanted to get back to here? Let's see.
But you're just looking that up, Steve. Sam actually put another tip in, and that is to grab from your diff file your OSD settings and your auxiliaries. Then you can just use that to copy to new models, and it's already set up for you. And another one that I thought of while you were talking is when you're setting up INAV, if you've got a new flight controller, obviously the first thing we do is plug it in and do the calibration of the accelerometer, because it's easier outside the plane. But also, I'd recommend setting up the mixer, because then you know the servo output's all ready before you even solder or connect anything to it. Because I've seen a few people in the group who have soldered up the servo pins, put the mixer on, and they're all in the wrong place. And they're, how do you skip things? It's like, well, no, set up the mixer first, then you see what order they need to go in.
Right.
The thing with the template, like a text file, it's really interesting because I do the same for years already. But not only the modes and the OSD, but I have a huge template with also all the FR Sky settings I have to set, with all my with bank angles, as so many things, adjustments, with so many things I have always in my template. So if I set up a new plane, I just copy and paste all over. The only things I have to set up are my ports, a few base configuration things like auto launch, and that's basically it. And I can start flying. By the way, one addition for Steve's idea with the flight controller image and markings where what is connected, you can also just print it, fold it together, and stick it into the plane. That would be the best option, I think.
That's a good idea too. Keep it very simple, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's just a lot of good tools. Well, I think a lot of good stuff this month. I really appreciate everyone. Really did a fantastic job, and thanks for putting it for me reading for the first 15 minutes of the show. Samantha, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
I think you're muted.
For reading and helping me. So thank you.
Oh, hey, lovely. Great to have you here. Really appreciate it. Mark, thanks so much for going over that as far as how you get started, because I was curious. You did answer one question I had, which was, do you put auto level on before or after the auto-tune? It sounds like you did before.
Yeah, auto level actually I use. Personally, I don't use it at all. I still use the old board pitch trim, but for some very specific reason of my use case. But you can enable the auto level anytime you enable angle mode. That's absolutely no problem.
Okay. Yeah, I've stopped using auto level as well, but it's it seems like I figured if you can tune your plane well enough in manual, you don't really need auto level.
That has nothing with tuning to do. It's just for making sure the altitude hold is working correctly. Okay. So for navigation modes.
Is that the one? The auto level. Does it write to the flight controller after it's done? Does it change the flight controller settings every time?
Yes, the auto level is stored in the board pitch trim or level pitch trim in the mechanics tab.
Right, so
and it's automatically saved.
Yeah. I'm looking for I turned stats off, and I turned that off because I don't want to have something write to the flight controller, just so I could avoid the reset bug. So that's the reason I stopped using it.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, guys. Well, thanks for being here this month. Darren, thank you so much. That was really, the model looks fantastic. I'm looking forward to playing with the version 3 now. It was about a year ago when version 2 came out, though.
I think it's longer than that. I was looking at the release notes. I'm sure it was 2020.
Because there was a
while.
There was a bug in there, and it was like, I think it was one of the auto-tune. It was set with the rates in version 2, right?
It was in what? Yeah, it was in one of them. And
yeah, it was version 2, and I remember my plane ended up on top of the roof at a local elementary school, and I go talk to the principal over there to get a custodian to come out from the district and get my plane off the top of the roof. So that was about a year ago, I thought.
Yeah, I can find out.
Yeah, you can check that out. Luke, thank you so much for explaining how everything works with BL Heli. That was definitely a great tutorial. There's so much more to it than I ever thought there was. So
yeah, and there's lots that I haven't covered. Hopefully, nobody fell asleep though halfway through what I was talking about.
No, I was just the only problem I had was I couldn't see it that well. I see it afterwards a lot clearer, but it's very small when we're looking on screen here. So
yeah, I also found an option to zoom in for myself, so as at least in the stream it's zoomed in this little bit better.
Okay, good.
All right. So, all right. Well, until next time, everybody, thank you for joining us on Wing Talk, and we'll catch you next month.
Bye.
Bye-bye.